Folks, welcome to Retro Reload. I am your host, Dash V, and with me today I have...
I'm T. Fugmar.
I'm Jeremy, or Fighter Pilot, or Red Beer Gamer.
He'll just keep on adding, handles if you let him, folks. He'll just keep adding names, so you gotta put a limit on him. So yes, I am in fact. Those of you that know my tales of Windows 10 woe, I'm actually broadcasting today with a SingStar microphone because USB microphones in Windows 10 for some reason have weird issues. Hopefully we don't have audio issues today. That said, we do have a topic that, I think I might as well go ahead and make good use of the SingStar microphone. We'll introduce the topic by song, and we'll see if you can guess what today's topic, in fact, is, folks. Because I'm dreaming of a white console, just like the ones I used to know, where the CDs glistened and children listened to hear echo the dolphins' audio. Dio. Yes, I'm dreaming of a white console with every new review I write. May your days, may your days, may your days be free of all strife, and may all of your consoles be white. Folks, today's episode, I'm dreaming of the Dreamcast. Are you guys with me?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes, that was really good.
So, I actually missed the Dreamcast when it first came out, but I kind of encountered it later on. So we'll get to the Dreamcast a little bit later in the show, and it's not going to be our only topic. We're going to segue into some other stuff, but the Dreamcast discussion will lead into it. Before we get to that, though, we do have some news topics. Fighter Pilot, I believe you have one, and then I have one in the way of announcement / Dash V makes a complete 180.
Well, first news topic is Mario Maker, which all three of us here have a pre-order for. Comes out this Friday, and this is the reason I bought a Wii U, strictly for Mario Maker.
I also bought my Wii U specifically for Mario Maker, so I am looking forward to this so much. So, and Tyler, like you shared a little bit before show, like how serious of a purchase was this for you?
It was, a pretty big deal because I actually haven't bought any games this year. Late last year, I kind of realized that I had a huge backlog, and it was sort of like a New Year's resolution, I guess. And I said I'm not buying any games until I make a significant dent, which I haven't really done, but I still haven't bought anything except for this because this is huge. And I was actually able to use a bunch of gift cards, and so I didn't actually spend any money on it so far. I think I'll end up owing like $3 or something before it's all done. So it's pretty big for me.
That's some pretty good willpower too, by the way. I know that you can.
I give credit for that one.
Yeah, sometimes I don't know if either of you guys are like me. Like sometimes I can wonder if I'm going just a little too far with the video games.
I don't think so.
But when I know that I can, when I can put the purchases and everything, and the impulse buys on hiatus for a while until those special games really come along, then I'm able to know that okay, I'm not at that level of just like crazy hoarding obsession just yet.
Almost.
But I think I'm dangerously close. So, what about you, Jeremy? Like, is this the only... So you bought the Wii U specifically for this game, but there are other games certainly that you must be looking forward to.
Yeah, I haven't really looked into it. I bought my games when I bought Wii U, but specifically it's Mario Maker.
Gotcha.
That's what I put all my time in, and I know it's like Star Fox coming out. Of course, I'm interested in that. That's all the ones I really know right now, but Mario
Now,
Maker was the reason.
one of the things I'm looking forward to is supposedly Mario Maker comes with something that very few, if any, Wii games come with anymore. Wii U, that is, which is an actual paper manual. Supposedly, there's a really thick manual bundled with the book. I'll be really disappointed if that turns out to be not the case, but from what I hear, it's a pretty good manual. Lots of tongue-in-cheek humor in there, and classic old Nintendo manual style. So I'm hoping that that the game is well built enough to where I don't really need the manual, but that the manual is full enough to where I could enjoy a nice leisurely read while my son is playing Mario Maker and I'm waiting for my next turn.
And also know on Mario Maker, you do not get everything right away. You have to play to earn stuff.
Oh,
This
really?
is not difficult though.
You have to unlock
Yeah,
certain.
like if you don't like pipes and stuff, you don't get it right away. And from what I've read, all you have to do is build and play. That's all you have to do. And from the
Wow.
guy who was reviewing, he said it's actually a good thing because you're not overwhelmed. So at first you build a basic stage, and the more you play, the more unlock, and the more advanced. And I was like, that makes sense because I play games before when you're overwhelmed, like, oh, I got everything, and I don't know what to do. He
Yeah.
said it took about a week for him to unlock everything.
Oh, wow. So well, I guess that's the benefit, right? I'll be able to, I'll play it, maybe unlock some things. My son will play it like constantly, unlock everything, and then I'll just sit down and be overwhelmed and never make a level. It's probably how it'll work. That's how Minecraft and everything else, Little Big Planet, all worked out for me. So, I'm on like 2
And you get
tutorials.
to share
Like,
stuff too, though.
like
That's a big
yeah.
plus.
My dad or my son's building like a scale model replica of New York City, and I'm like still trying to figure out how to get the first tutorial completed.
Build a dirt house.
So that's what's going on this Friday, folks. Mario Maker. If you pre-ordered it, do make sure to go pick it up. I think it's going to be really worth. Gonna have been worth the wait.
Will we put stages up for fans to check out?
Absolutely. There's actually a stage. Remember when I told you guys before that there was a secret game I was working on?
Yes.
I actually had my own. I was working in this thing called Mario Improvement, which is like a homebrew Mario level maker, and I was working with that to basically build my own set of 8 levels for Super Mario Brothers, which my son lovingly calls Super Mario Bleep. He says bleep because he can't swear, but basically it's called Super Mario Bleep because each level in the game is specifically designed to make you at some point scream out, "Who puts that there?" except a big giant bleep. So, so it's definitely challenging. Not quite as insane as Impossible Mario. If you guys have ever seen that before, if not, I encourage you to go YouTube search for Impossible Mario. I don't make the levels that hard. You can actually beat it without being an AI, and there is an end to it. It doesn't just freeze up and lock after you spend hours getting through 2 levels. So, but it definitely is a challenge, and most of my friends that have played it on the NES, on the Retron 5, because I made an IPS patch for my copy of Mario Duck Hunt, most of my friends who have played it have vowed never to play it again, and they want me to delete all footage that I've recorded of them playing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I will share that. I will remake that. I will lovingly remake all of that stuff in Mario Maker, which I think will be actually easier, because Mario Improvement, it's a great homebrew attempt at creating a drag and drop, what you see is what you get, Mario Level Maker, but there were some limitations that were just inherent to the fact that you're basically rewiring existing levels for Super Mario Brothers. So in some levels you were kind of limited by what the levels already had. There were certain types of items and blocks where you could replace them and change them with other items or other enemies or other objects, but you were limited to the number of objects that particular level had in it originally, because you're limited to the size of the original ROM. So I'm really, really excited to get my hands on a legit Mario editor from Nintendo themselves, where I expect all those limitations and more are just gone. So really looking forward to it. I can make levels totally ridiculous. But So that was one piece of news. The other piece of news, and this is going to come as interesting to some folks, Dash V's 180. So you folks have heard me before voice my my opinion on Retro VGS and whether or not I thought it was a a viable console. To be clear, my original opinion was I want it to be a viable console. I think they're putting a lot of hard work into it, but I don't know that the audience is really there, especially because it won't come with an out-of-the-box game library. They announced last week that there will be adapters available for the Retro VGS that will allow it to play original 2600 games, ColecoVision games, and Intellivision games, and NES games straight from the original carts.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I've been kind of following this. I'm sure you have too, fairly closely. And I mean, it sounds like a good idea. The thing that, and I don't want to say too much about it because nobody really knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But the fact that we haven't seen anything, all they've done is make promises, and they say, "Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this." There's nothing.
Yeah, they need to be. I do agree. I think that they need to be a little bit careful with how much they pre-hype stuff up. There's going to be a Kickstarter launching for it.
It's next week, I think.
Yeah, this upcoming week, and I'm gonna say I am cautiously optimistic, and it was a long, hard, and torturous road with the Retron 5, but in the end, the Retron 5 turned out to be totally worth it, totally worth the wait, totally worth the initial bumpy launch and that kind of thing, and so I'm glad that I followed through with the trail of the Retron 5. I'm glad that I kept my pre-order in place and that I was able to be one of the early adopters to kind of enjoy the console while a lot of people were still wondering and debating whether or not the emulation would work, whether or not the controller support for the original stuff would work, well, whether or not game XYZ would work, while everybody else was kind of, not everybody, but while a lot of people were busy, kind of just pissing on the idea itself, I threw down my money and I took a chance, knowing I could be burned. But to this day, I don't feel like I got burned. I feel like it was money well spent, and it's let me actually open wide actually the Famicom collection that I have, because before, like, if I knew there was a Famicom or Super Famicom version that was in English or that didn't really require English to be playable, yeah, I'd pop for it, but I didn't really collect Famicom games. So there was a whole bunch of games that just fell completely off my radar. Once they pushed it to the next level and introduced IPS patching, where you could use ROM translations and stuff on the console, my Famicom collection, I think I now have like 20 Famicom games and about 18 Super Famicom games. Because as long as there's a translation for it, I got no problem plunking down the money for it. So I really appreciate that. I'm hoping the Retro VGS ends up being something like the Retron 5 toward the end, meaning I hope that they're able to get the level of compatibility that'll really make people kind of hold on to the system. If you have a Nintendo adapter but the support is really shoddy, it's going to look bad. If you have solid support of things like ColecoVision, though, and Intellivision, there are no reliable current clones out for these systems. It's all old, hardware that's either dead or resurrected and will die again at some point, in the near future. So I think it's really cool that they can provide an outlet for folks to play those games. And I think it's also really interesting that they could have gone the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis route, like just go everything mainstream 8-bit and 16-bit. I actually have a lot of respect for the fact that they went to super old school, and it's like, here's 2600, here's Intellivision, here's ColecoVision, because that's something Hyperkin has not and doesn't appear to be, they have not been interested in it, and it doesn't appear like they will be interested in it, in the near future, but there's still a void there. maybe this could be the place where our Game Gear games, get revived. Maybe this could be a place where some of the other niche consoles that have good titles like 5200 and 7800. Maybe these things can have life there, and we could actually enjoy between the Retro VGS and the Retron 5. You could basically have the best of all worlds.
That's if it actually ends up happening, and that's the thing that nobody knows. And I mean, I've heard a lot of buzz about this recently, though, as I'm sure you know. When it was originally sort of announced, they said it would be the $150 to $200 range.
Yeah.
And now they're saying $300 to $400. Yeah, that has priced a lot of people right out of the market. I was really looking forward to it. Now, $400, that's a lot of money. So I'm undecided at this point. I was really looking forward to it. I was going to do the Kickstarter with the yellow, shell, but I don't know. I don't know that I can justify the $400.
I think it's going to depend on what it comes with. If it's like $400 for the console, and then you got to spend like another $30 per adapter, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. If the adapters are included, or if the adapters are like $5, $10 a pop, it may still be worth it. If you were to pick up a working, fully refurbed ColecoVision that would have, say, like another 10 years, 15 years left in it, you're talking $150 easy. So there's half the cost of it. So if you look at it as I'm getting a new console, plus I'm getting a new ColecoVision, it's actually still a pretty darn good deal. Another thing too I wasn't aware of was they use DB9 connectors for the controllers, which means these earlier systems, the Atari, the Coleco, etc., you're going to be able to use your Genesis, your Atari, your ColecoVision gamepads. I don't know why you'd want to use the ColecoVision gamepad, but if you're that much a glutton for punishment and you want the nostalgia factor, you can certainly get it, which I think is pretty darn cool. But yeah, I can definitely hear you with the price. Hyperkin kind of walked that same line too, right? Where they announced the lower price. I think they were announcing originally $100. When I pre-ordered it, it was $100. And then, when they launched, it was $140, and then they had some hardware problems, and they resolved the hardware problems, but then they had to jack the price another, I think $10 or $20, so it's like $160, $150. I think what these guys underestimate is just how you're trying to cover a lot of ground. I think that whether you're doing it as software emulation, like Hyperkin has chosen, or whether you're doing it as hardware emulation. In this case, there's in the Retro VGS, there's a built-in FPGA, and so basically they have different configuration files that the adapters, either the adapters will have it in there, it's not clear yet. Either the adapters are going to have these config files in them, or this console itself will have to have some kind of persistent memory where it can load the config file based on what kind of cartridge is plugged in. But effectively, there's configuration files that tell the FPGA what kind of system it should be. So there'll be a configuration that tells it, here's what it means to be an Atari 2600, or here's what it means to be a ColecoVision, and then they'll go from there. Now, the bigger thing that worries me is not the price, to be honest with you. It's actually the same thing that worried people with the Retron 5. The accuracy of the emulation. FPGAs can be perfect if they're programmed perfectly, but much like an emulator, right? It takes some time. It takes some finesse. It might even take some per game finesse for certain things, because maybe what works for 99% of the games, doesn't accurately capture the quirk of the hardware well enough to cover that other 1%. So one of their mantras is they don't believe in connected to the internet all the time. They don't believe in DRM and all that stuff, which is good on the surface, right? They believe in get it right and ship it. But with emulation, that's not really a get it right and ship it type of technology, whether it's FPGA or software. I mean, it's kind of a we got it right, and then somebody says, hey, this game doesn't work. either you
Oops.
fix it or you say that one won't work. Sorry. Yeah. Oops.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean, when I first heard about the adapters, I was really surprised because that really blew me away. Because this whole time, everybody sort of assumed it was going to be just new games for a new console. That was it. And then all of a sudden they throw the adapters and the emulation thing out there. And you're exactly right. And that was what I was going to get at, is that like now, there's no room for error. Before, I mean, you had a console and you made games for that console, and it was great. You knew what the console could do, so you made your games for that. Now with the emulation and the adapters, it's kind of weird. I don't think they can, and maybe they have the best people working on it, I don't know. But I mean, it seems almost impossible to make these emulators, these programs, to run every single game because it hasn't been done yet. On any console or any PC or anything, it hasn't been done. There's that's 100%.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see how that works out. We do know that with with emulation of Nintendo, Super Nintendo, that kind of stuff, the accuracy's gotten pretty darn close. But with some of these other, with some of the earlier consoles, like they're not starting out with. I noticed they're not starting out with Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, TurboGrafx 16, right? They're starting out with the more modest, to emulate systems like Atari and ColecoVision and Intellivision. What's really interesting is that from a hardware standpoint, these consoles are incredibly similar. The CPU that they use is similar. There's some differences in the graphics chips and some of the sound and everything, but for the most part, right, it's 6502 emulation that you're doing. So
yeah, but you could build one from Prussian Radio Shack if you wanted to.
Yeah.
There's very little that's custom made for Atari or for ColecoVision.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I'm not totally jury out on it yet is because they say things like always on, they kind of frown on, tons of updates they frown on, that kind of thing. I think it was in the context of forced updates, right? So I think there's going to be a certain amount of when the console comes out of the box, it'll do a certain amount of stuff. And for the lifetime of the console, if you just want it for what you bought it for, you should be able to get by without any forced updates. So, however, if you want to use some of the more open aspects of the console, what really surprised me was I went and I reread their mission, actually, what they were trying to do with the VGS, and suddenly the adapters made total sense, right? They've been saying for a while now that what they want is that they want to have a console where home brewers can have their stuff live in the way that they originally wrote it. And so it makes a lot of sense that if your intent is to allow the 2600 homebrewers to have more than an actual 2600 or 7800 console to play their games on, not all these guys are going to have the money, the time, or even the desire to say, okay, let's take the ROM and slap it into a fake Jaguar cart with some text file on it that tells the FPGA it's a 2600. Some of them are going to say, why don't I just make 500 more Atari 2600 cartridges like what I already have, right? And just push it out there, right? Why incur this extra cost, this extra hassle, and now only people with a Retro VGS can play it? That doesn't make any sense because that might even end up being a smaller market than the people that actually have a 2600 that still works.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, but now, right, if Retro can say, well, hey, guess what, right? Put a 2600 cartridge into this adapter and put it into the Retro VGS, we'll figure it out and we'll play it. Or go ahead and still play it on the Atari, it doesn't matter. Now you've opened a new door for you've actually widened the market for a lot of these homebrewers, so they can just keep doing stuff the way they've been doing it. You can release it as an Atari game with an Atari box, with an Atari manual, and bam, right? People can play it on their 2600 or their Retro VGS. I think it's actually right in line with their vision statement that they wanted to make it easy for homebrewers to be able to have a platform to release their games. What better platform than whatever platform you've already been developing on? Just, just pop it in and play. So, like you said, there might be some devils in the details with the FPGA, but I think there's a difference too between, you know, always on, you have to get the update, and hey, if you want to, there are firmware updates available that you could download to an SD card or something, pop it in, and now you have an updated FPGA for better 2600 emulation. But you don't require that download in order to play games as long as you're willing to play them with the limitations of the initial release.
Good point. I never really thought about that way.
So that's just me speculating. I think it'd be silly to have a machine. It'd be silly and a waste of the machine's potential to release in such a way that you know, that you're forced to have it. The other thing too that they kind of alluded to was somebody else actually dug this up and posted this on the Retro VGS Facebook page. It is entirely possible that the games that do come in Jaguar cartridge format could have baked into them their own definition that is a configuration for the FPGA that's worked out the kinks specifically for their game. So if you wanted to play a Retro VGS game in it that is really at its heart an Atari ROM, if you got it in Retro VGS cartridge form and plugged it in, it may work bug-free without any firmware update being necessary at all, because the developers work through the kinks by working around it in the FPGA configuration, versus if you're just going to use the vanilla out-of-the-box emulation, maybe it's got some quirks unless you update the firmware. So they can still have that, plug it in, and it just works with their own stuff, but then for other stuff that they support, there might be mileage may vary, and maybe we'll smooth it out with some firmware updates. But you don't have to get them. If you just want to get a copy of Asteroids that works the way you expect it, buy the Retro VGS port of Asteroids.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm holding out hope for it. The price was definitely it went from impulse buy to, I'll have to figure out where I'm going to get that money from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was an impulse buy many years ago, actually, long after its lifetime, was the Dreamcast. I did not get this when it first came out. Tyler, I don't think you don't have one, right?
No, I've actually never even played one before. Kind of a funny story. Because Sega, for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, but for whatever reason, Sega consoles never really caught on here. I don't know why. Because I mean,
by here, do you mean Utah, or you mean in your family, or what do you mean?
In anywhere I've ever lived. I mean, I've always lived in Utah, but I mean, I've lived kind of all over the state. But I mean, and I don't know if it's just the people I knew or what it was, because looking back, as I was thinking about this earlier today when I was a kid, I never knew anybody who had a Master System. I knew like 2 people who had a Sega Genesis. I've never even seen a Saturn. I've never played a Dreamcast. Like, nobody I knew ever had a Sega system. We were always like Atari or Nintendo or whatever else. Sega just didn't catch on here, I guess. I don't know. So I have no idea.
Interesting. Yeah, I did have friends that had I had 2 friends that had Sega Genesis. I had a friend that had the Sega CD. Like you, I'd never really encountered in the wild during their heyday a Dreamcast or a Sega Saturn or anything like that. So, but it was definitely there. Like the same friend I knew that had a Sega Genesis also he actually had the Master System Power Base converter for the Sega Genesis, and he had a Golden Axe Warrior, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think to this day I've actually never even seen a Master System in person.
Wow.
Yeah, they aren't here. I don't know where they are.
I saw one at the thrift store. I wanted to pick it up, and it was gone by the time I got back to it. So it was complete in box, my friends. It had the zapper, it had the controllers, and it came with a game. I don't know which one, but it was complete in box.
If I walked by Master System, I probably wouldn't even know what it was.
What was that?
If I walked by one, I honestly probably wouldn't know what it was. If I would just look to the side like, oh, what's that?
No, fortunately, this one was in the box. This one was in the box, okay. So it said emblazoned right on it, Sega Master System, blah, blah, blah. But I did manage to get... The problem was there was the same thrift store I'd gone to the week previous, and there was like a whole you can kind of see them right behind me, the whole string of like Master System games.
Hmm.
I picked up every single one of those for 29 cents a piece on the same day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty epic. And then I'm looking like there has to be a console because they're all complete. So I'm like, there has to be a console. There has to be a console. So I looked up and down that whole thrift store and I could not find it. It was the week later that I saw it there, and they've got this thing where if like if you donate, you get like 20% off whatever your purchase is. So I go back out to my car and I'm like looking for like what can I donate? What can I donate? Because usually I have like stuff from I usually clean my garage fairly regularly, and I'll put stuff in the back of my car like good useful stuff that I intend to donate, but I kind of game it a little bit so that the donation syncs up with like something that I want to get usually. So
Is this in New York or in California?
no, this is here in California.
Oh,
It's
okay.
Savers actually. Savers is the thrift store. If you donate to them, they will give you, a reasonable donation. It's not like you give them like a pair of socks and they give you like 20% off. It's like you have. So I'll give them like legit stuff. Like I'll have like, an electric grill or something I'm not using, or a kitchen appliance, or I'll have some, like a bag of clothes from my kid or something that's not worn out, and I'll have these in my car, meaning to go to the thrift store, but unless like I'm, I don't always go to the thrift store all the time, so I just leave the stuff in my car, and then if I see something at the thrift store I want, I'll go and I'll bring, here's a bag of clothes, and then I'll get the 20% gift card. So I go out to my car to get this, and I turn it in. I think it was like an electric griddle or something that I turned in. And then I go to the thing, and somebody else was already checking out with it. And what was cool is like it was a senior who had also turned in something to get it. So they turned in, they made a donation, got the 20% gift card, and then because of their 20% off card, then they like because they're a senior, they get like an extra 30% discount or whatever. So this lucky guy, right, got a Sega Master System complete in box for like $50 or $60. It was insane.
Wow.
I was just like, yeah, I was like, well played, Grandpa, well played. So.
Interesting. I didn't know that they gave the discount if you donate, because that's actually where I got my TurboGrafx 16 was from a Savers here in Utah.
Yeah, you should gray up the hair and gray up the beard.
I don't need to gray it up. It's already gray enough.
I think in order to be a senior there, it has to be like 60 or older.
I'm not quite that old.
I don't think you'd qualify. I don't think you'd qualify. But yeah, I actually that particular Dreamcast and controller that you're looking at right now, I actually picked up at that same thrift store, Savers, for I think it was $9.
Wow.
And as I was ringing it up, it came with a memory card, memory unit and everything. As I'm ringing it up, the guy like ringing it out goes, "Oh, this is just a crime." He's like, "We're gonna give this to you for $10." I'm like, "Yes, you are." So, and I brought it home and it worked. It worked perfectly. I fired it up, and with disc-based systems, it's always a question whether or not it's gonna work. But it worked just fine. So that's actually my second Dreamcast that I have. The other one I bought off of somebody at work 15 years ago, I think, for $10. So I've got good luck with $10 Dreamcasts. So what was really
Let's also
good...
note that.
Go ahead. Also note.
Oh, okay. That it's actually 60 years tomorrow that the Dreamcast released. 9/9/99.
Oh wow. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Now, how long did the Dreamcast last when it came out? Like it came out and then they were done like the next year, weren't they?
That's what it seemed like from what I remember. Let's see.
So there's actually
I
though.
remember briefly.
Yeah, it was very very brief. What's really cool is that the Dreamcast had a very very I don't want to say fanatical because that puts like a bad bent on it. It had a very passionate fan base. And what's really cool about that is that there is a ton of homebrew available for the Dreamcast. So if you can pick one up, everything from, there's a Doom port for it, there's Beats of Rage, which is like an open source Streets of Rage-ish kind of engine. So there's tons and tons of homebrew beat-em-ups playable on the Dreamcast. It was discontinued in March 31st, 2001, as it turns out. So, and it launched in '99, right?
It's September 9th, 1999, and March 31st. So not even 2 years.
So just
crazy.
barely, yeah, not even
A
just
year and a
shy
half.
of 2 years. But had some really great games. Echo the Dolphin, like tons and tons of Street Fighter games, like Street Fighter and X-Men and X-Men versus Capcom. Really, really,
Crazy
really,
Taxi.
really. What's that?
Crazy Taxi.
I did not get to play Crazy Taxi, but I did play Echo the
That was one
Dolphin.
of my favorites.
Echo the Dolphin looks amazing. So if you can get a VGA adapter for the console, a lot of the graphics were available in 640 by 480. So if you hook it into a modern LCD that or LED TV that takes VGA and you have the adapter, you could play a lot of the games way, way better than they looked on the CRT. In many ways, the Dreamcast was very ahead of its time. So another game that's coming out. This has given some people some angst, but Pure Solar. It's had numerous delays. It's already come out on the Sega Genesis. Been reprinted a couple times on the Sega Genesis. There's an HD director's cut edition that has even more gameplay, more longer story, that kind of thing. That's going to be coming. It's already out on PlayStation 3 and 4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, even Wii U, which is what's causing folks angst. There's a lot of folks that backed the Kickstarter project for Dreamcast. They're still waiting. Meanwhile, it's launched on just about every other console. But it should be just around the corner, folks. Be patient. These things take time. Dreamcast isn't like your other consoles. They can't just fix it in a software update. They have to get it right the first time. You want a fixed, well, you want a game that doesn't require fixing. So yeah, another game for, so that's one to look out for. New releases still coming out for the Dreamcast from homebrewers. Another game that I believe came out recently. I have to double check if this actually did get released or if it's in the process. It's called Alice's Mom's Rescue.
Alice's Mom's Rescue.
Yeah, it is a platformer. Let me see if I can bring it up and do a screen share. So yeah, the game is Alice's Mom's Rescue. It is a 2D platformer. It looks like it actually got released February 9th of this year. And I can give you I'll do a little bit of a screen share here. You can check out, this is Alice's Mom's Rescue. Got kind of a nice, artistic style about it. It came region free, so it would run on all the PAL and NTSC. Plenty of stages. The graphics were kind of pixel arty. What was really interesting is this is actually Alice in Wonderland. So Alice in Wonderland's mom gets kidnapped, and you have to save her. So I'll see if I can bring up a. Let me see if I can play a video for you guys, so you can get a feel for the graphics and sound. It was Red Blaze actually that introduced me to this game in the post-show discussion for one of our other episodes. And I'll just show you a few minutes of gameplay footage of this.
Make sure you lock the screen to you.
So that is Alice's Mom's Rescue
Huh.
for the Dreamcast. So it definitely looks like if you have a Dreamcast and you're into the Dreamcast homebrew scene, that's definitely one worth checking out and picking up.
Is there a like a central sort of place everybody goes to find these games, or is this like Atari Age is kind of the place where a lot of brewers, the store there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There actually is, and a lot of those places we can drop a little link down in the doodly-doo. So the problem is, like, we mention them on the show, and then the next week they might transfer to a different domain, and then it doesn't work. But yeah, there's definitely some normal stomping grounds for a lot of the Dreamcast stuff.
Yeah, because I wasn't aware of any of it. Honestly, I didn't know there was homebrew for it, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, actually, there's a Nintendo emulator, a Super Nintendo emulator. There's a TurboGrafx 16 emulator, which will actually I don't know if it plays Turbo Duo games, but I do know it'll play ISOs of those games if they're formatted in the right way. So some games play full speed, some games don't. We got to remember, as ahead of the time as the Dreamcast was, its processing power not as much as, say, an Xbox or some of these newer consoles. So it does support emulation. I think Nintendo emulation was just fine speed-wise. Some of the Super Nintendo emulation depends on the game. So, but yeah, it'll run emulators, homebrew.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if you see one, you happen upon one at a yard sale or at a thrift store, and I would say between $10 to $20 if it comes with a controller and the hookups, that should be impulse buy, right there. There's definitely enough good games on the system to warrant the purchase. So Fighter Pilot, do you have any favorite games on the Dreamcast?
Well, like I said before, it was definitely Crazy Taxi, and I forget what's the South Park name. It was a South Park game, which was really fun. And if I remember right, my mom hated that game.
Oh, South Park. You're talking about the one. It was like a first-person game, right? And you threw snowballs.
Yeah.
Oh, what was that name? I don't remember the name of the game, but I definitely remember the game because you could. The alt fire was you pee on the snowball and then you throw a yellow snowball at somebody. You hear the zipper and everything. It was quite for its day. It was quite provocative.
Oh, recently got a Dreamcast. Like actually, it was the week I got the Wii U. I got 2 Dreamcast.
Oh, nice. Was it part of the same bundle or just like total coincidence?
Well, my friend had one. He sent it to me. It had no power and not the RCA cable. I was like, oh, great. My other friend's like, oh, I found mine. He's like, give me $20 and I'll send you everything. It came with everything but power, also, so I had an over power cable. So, but that one came with the RCA cable and it came in a controller, so it kind of worked out.
Nice. Now I do have to say, the Dreamcast controller, I don't know what they were thinking.
I think they were high on watching UFO movies.
Honestly, I think you might be correct. So, the controller is uncomfortable to hold. If you have 2 memory cards in it, it can be top heavy. What's really interesting?
Pretty cool though.
The memory cards were interesting because they kind of look like little Game Boys. So, and you could actually get, so not only could you, if you had a fresh battery in it, which would die 2 hours later, but if you had a fresh battery in it, you could actually scroll through the different saves that were on the card, and you could manage the saves on the card, which was kind of neat. But then there was also, you could get little mini games that played on the virtual memory unit. So that was kind of it was a neat idea, but the lifetime of the battery, it's a CR2032. I don't know if you can see in the back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a standard battery, but these go for like, it's like $3 to $4 for one of these, and then the battery lasts like, you know, only a couple hours. So
And it's not like double or triple A's where you just got them laying around.
right. It would have been nice, but again, ahead of its time. What would have been nice is if there was some kind of rechargeable battery option.
So if the battery dies, you
Would've
lose
been
the
so bad.
saves.
No, I don't believe that the battery was tied to the saves itself.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
I don't know that for sure. Actually, I would have to. Most of the games that I've played on it have been the homebrew games. Most of the games that I played did not support directly the save features of the console. So I have not actually. I haven't played a game intensely enough on the Dreamcast to actually create a save and then try to load it back. But I could definitely give that a shot. I think the other thing too that was interesting about the Dreamcast for its time was the fact that it had a built-in modem was pretty interesting. If I can show it right there. Oh no, hang on, right there. You see the phone line in it. So it was, a couple of not really firsts, because certainly they weren't the first ones to have like an on-screen menu and heads-up display and stuff, right? The CDI, the 3DO, the Sega CD, they certainly had those as well. But this is the first time that like a major software developer's OS appeared on a console. This was actually powered by Windows CE. So there was a partnership with Microsoft. So the operating system that's behind it is actually Windows, Windows CE. And this was kind of the jumping off point where Microsoft learned what they needed to learn to develop what would become the Xbox. So
Interesting. I didn't know that.
yeah, so that was kind of an interesting little tidbit about the Dreamcast. The other thing that's really interesting is, much like the Sega CD, much like the Turbo Duo, the copy protection for these was all totally like software based. So you don't need a mod chip or anything. You can just burn homebrew ISOs, pop them in and play it. You don't need a mod chip to play homebrew on the Dreamcast. You can just burn ISOs to a normal CD, pop them in and play. So
You can also use a PS2 power cord to turn it on.
oh yeah, that's you know what? That's a good point. I didn't actually until you just mentioned that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Which is how I tested if they worked when I got my Dreamcast before the power came in.
Yeah, there's enough good games for the Dreamcast where I'm genuinely bummed that it wasn't more successful, when it was around. So
And that was Sega's last system, right? I believe.
yeah. Yep. So, and that's about it. I know that we still have a few minutes left on the show, but frankly, I mean, there's not a lot really to say about the Dreamcast, unless you're talking the homebrew scene. The homebrew scene is still alive and well. There's plenty of new, old ways to enjoy your Dreamcast. So we'll drop some of those links down in the doodly-doo, and you can check them out after the show. So look forward to Mario Maker this Friday, folks. If you've got some levels to share, we should probably, on the Retro Reload page itself, make a post where people can just post their usernames and things like that. It's going to be interesting. I don't really know too much about how the sharing of the levels works just yet, because I haven't had a chance to play that portion of it.
We'll
But
find
we
out
should
Friday and Saturday.
some way on the page for us to announce and share each other's levels.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure everybody will get right on that.
Immediately, my son's gonna have like 8 dozen levels, and I'm gonna have like one. So I'm gonna have one set of levels that like people will rage post about the how ridiculous the levels are and how much I should. I fully expect there'll be threats on my life. So if there's not, then I did not do a good enough job designing my levels.
I heard there's a Rube Goldberg level. When I heard that, I was like, I'm going to have to go download that one because that sounds interesting. So I guess you just stand there as Mario and you go through the level and Rube Goldberg machine.
My goodness. All right. Well, folks, this has been Retro Reload. Dreaming of a white console. If you could find a Dreamcast, pick it up. It was a good console. Killed, I would say, before its prime. But that doesn't mean that there weren't several good games released for it during its lifetime, and there were certainly lots of good games released for it after its lifetime. Check out Alice's Mom's Rescue. Hang on for Pure Solar. That's going to be awesome when it lands. And check out some of the other ones like Doom and things like that. Beats of Rage. There's some really good ways to kill some time with your old console. That's all I got, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.